they are home. On the 11th, on April 2026 at 2:07 Central European Time, the Orion capsule Integrity splashed down in the Pacific, off the coast of San Diego, less than a mile from the target point. 4 people, 10 days, during which the crew traveled a total of 1.1 million kilometers. The last 80,000 kilometers were covered by the capsule in the final 8 hours of the mission. We followed the final hours of this historic mission here on Mars Chronican, together with 5,300 people in the live stream. All 4 crew members, Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Jeremy Hansen, were seen at the end, healthy and in great spirits, smiling into the cameras aboard the USS John P. Murtaugh. Of course, they were personally welcomed by NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman.
Höchstpersönlich empfangen und begrüßt.
My name is Serwan, and this is Mars Chronican. The first 2 analysis videos about Artemis 2, covering the launch, malfunctions, TLI, lunar flyby, Carol, Earthset, solar eclipse, and more, are linked in the description. There you'll find everything that happened between April 1st and April 7th. We'll pick up right where we left off. After the flyby, the crew was on a free return trajectory. Physics would bring them home without any further major engine burns. What stood out during this phase was that the crew was in remarkable condition. Christina Koch said in an interview after the flyby that she wasn't ready to go home yet. That's someone who just saw Earth from 400,000 kilometers away and still isn't done with it. Wiseman briefly spoke over the radio with Mission Control and sounded like someone who just experienced the most beautiful moment of his life, and at the same time knows that it's over. Before we get to Reentry, if this video gives you something, then hit the hype button and give it a like. That sounds trivial, but it's literally the only thing that makes the algorithm show this video to people who haven't seen it yet. Thank you, and now let's continue. The crew was still testing the manual control of Orion during this phase, an important data point for future missions. Koch later described it as one of the most surprising experiences of the entire mission, how precisely and responsively Orion reacted to manual inputs, even when engines were deliberately shut down to simulate failure scenarios. Orion fell toward Earth and kept accelerating until the capsule reached its final speed of around 40,000 kilometers per hour. The European service module was jettisoned and burned up in the atmosphere. In the process, the additional silvery protective cover of the heat shield was created. Was jettisoned a little later. Reentry followed. On April 10th local time, a few thousand kilometers off the coast of San Diego, Orion began its plunge back into the atmosphere at nearly 40,000 kilometers per hour, practically identical to the TLI or translunar injection speed. This time, heading to Earth instead of the Moon. For a brief moment, the re-entry was even visible from the International Space Station. The re-entry angle had to be hit with under 0.4% deviation. Rick Henflink, the entry flight director, put it this way: less than 1 degree of angle deviation after a 250,000-mile flight to the Moon, and his team hit it. Quite impressive. This was where the hottest phase of the mission began. Orion began to enter the atmosphere with plasma building up around the capsule for 6 minutes. Thousands of degrees hot, it cuts off every radio signal, no contact with the crew, no contact with the capsule. Mission Control can't do anything except wait and trust that the spacecraft does what it's supposed to do. At this stage, the crew probably saw something like this. These images are from Artemis there. The images of re-entry from this mission have not yet been released. Henflink openly described this moment. If you're not scared at that moment, you probably don't have a pulse. But the blackout started when expected and ended when expected. And that gave the team the certainty that Orion was exactly on the right trajectory, or path. The tracking shots were breathtaking. Worlds better than at launch. During re-entry, Orion intentionally skipped briefly back out of the atmosphere to make the return a bit gentler on the hardware. So the capsule dipped into the atmosphere and briefly climbed again before making its final descent. When the signal returned, when the voices of the crew emerged from the static, Cheers broke out in the control center in Houston. And I also completely lost control for a moment during the stream. Very nice. Very, 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 very nice. Yes! Then came the parachutes. 11 in total. First, 3 so-called forward bay cover parachutes, followed by 2 drogue parachutes for stabilization. Then, 2 groups of 3 main parachutes each followed. Orion slowed down from 40,000 to 27 kilometers per hour. Howard Hugh, the Orion program manager, later said that was his personal wow moment. He said he was sitting alone in front of his screen shouting "Go, go, go" when the main parachutes opened. And then the splashdown. The US Navy and NASA recovery crews were waiting for the crew out on the water. They waited until the highly toxic fuel residues had dissipated before approaching and setting up the so-called porch. So, a platform where they can work. Meanwhile, divers began photographing the heat shield to document its condition immediately after splashdown. Shortly after, the side hatch opened and 4 recovery team members entered the capsule to help the 4 out of their seats. That was the moment when it was unmistakably clear that the mission was a success. Because from this point on, nothing could really go wrong anymore. And the first to step out was Christina Koch. Then Victor Glover, followed by Jeremy Hansen, and as is customary, the commander Reed Wiseman left the capsule last. While that was happening, the recovery crew was already starting to secure the data in the capsule to make sure they didn't lose any of it. At this stage, all the controllers and operators gathered in the mission control room in Houston, and the mood was visibly cheerful. They had already been on duty continuously for about 2 weeks at that time. Once on the platform, they were pulled away from the capsule and out onto the open sea before being picked up by several helicopters and flown to the USS John P. Murtaugh. Truly epic images were captured during this. Now to the question of what was learned from a technical standpoint, because that's the purpose of this mission. The first point concerns the capsule's pressure control. At the press conference, Hugh mentioned a new discovery. A flaw in the so-called pressure control assembly, that is, the pressure regulation unit. That was not known until now. It's not a dramatic problem because the crew was never in danger at any time, but it's new information that will be incorporated into the next missions. That's exactly what a test flight is for. The second point, the heat shield. NASA deployed divers who already took images of the underside of Orion while it was still in the water before the capsule was lifted onto the ship. 2 heat shield experts were on board the Murtaugh itself to carry out immediate inspections. The capsule will be brought back to the Kennedy Space Center, where detailed scans will follow. Hugh said the team is very excited about this data, and I'm excited about what they'll find. From the new reentry trajectory, which was more direct and steeper than with Artemis Tha, NASA hopes to gain insights into whether the heat shield handles it better or worse. Third point, communication. There was a brief communication outage between Orion and the ground after splashdown. The cause has not yet been fully determined. The team worked around it and handed over mission control on time. No drama, but a data point that's worth taking a closer look at. And then 286 components from Orion will be reused for future missions. A strong sign, but whether that makes a difference with a launch price of $4.2 billion US, I have my doubts. Just something personal. Since the launch of Artemis 2, so many new faces have joined this channel. It's overwhelming, and I'm truly grateful for it. And to our longtime channel members, hey there, young man, I'm still filming. Give me another 10 minutes. Can you give me a kiss like how you jump? Yes. Hello, Bussy. Hello. And to our longtime channel members, you are the reason why we can do things the way we do. Thank you. And a big thank you, of course, goes to our sponsor, Prusa. Without their support, this channel would look completely different. More about this in the description below. And now to the final chapter of this mission. What happened after that? About 12 to 24 hours after splashdown, the crew returned to Houston to be with their families. Wiseman called Sean Quinn, the Exploration Ground System Manager from the Murtaugh. Quinn described that moment as his personal highlight of the day, hearing Reed's voice and knowing that all four were okay. Amit Chadria, the acting associate administrator, said a sentence in his closing statement that stuck with me. He said 53 years ago humanity left the moon. This time we're coming back to stay. That's a promise that will now be measured by Artemis III, A4 and V. What's next? Artemis 3 is scheduled for next year, that is 2027. An Orion spacecraft will test the Human Landing System, or HLS for short, that is the lunar lander in Earth orbit. In the process, it will dock with either one or both HLS landers, because both SpaceX and Blue Origin are each providing an HLS variant. All of this happens in low Earth orbit. A kind of Apollo 9 moment. Testing systems before you need them. Artemis 4 is scheduled for early 2028 and will bring the first crew to the moon since Apollo 17. At least that's the plan. And Artemis 5 is supposed to take place in the same year at the end of 2028. And NASA has made it clear that this exact cadence is the goal. Only that ensures the experience and safety that are necessary. Anything else leads to every mission becoming a one-off feat and extremely expensive and slow. There's one last moment from the press conference that I don't want to skip. Howard Hughes, the Orion manager, was asked if today is better than Star Wars. He had mentioned in old interviews that as a child, the first Star Wars movie got him into space travel. His father had taken him to the cinema back then. His father is no longer alive.
I would say 1,000, I don't know what the number is, thousands of times better. You know, I would say that I shared a moment with my father. He took me to see Star Wars. He's not alive today. I wish he was, because that little kid who saw and was inspired by the stars, and now we're able to send our crew out to the stars, the farthest any humans have been. I mean, I can't even express just how I feel.
He answered thousands of times better. I wish he were here today. That's space travel. Not just the numbers and trajectories, but the people who worked for decades toward this moment and sometimes aren't here anymore to experience it. 4 people have returned. The spacecraft is being inspected. The data is being analyzed. And somewhere in Huntsville, in McGregor, at the Kennedy Space Center, but also in Bremen, Vienna, Paris, and Turin, thousands of people are already starting to prepare the next mission. Finally, a quote from a journalist, JJ Love from Tech Talk Media. Curiosity is not a luxury, but the most human thing we have. You have not only tested a spaceship, but also human potential, and you have taken all of us along on this journey. Every child who has looked up at the moon in the past few days has done so in a different way. Thank you all. You have not only tested a spacecraft, but also human potential, and you have taken all of us along on this journey. Every child who has looked up at the moon in the past few days has done so in a different way. My name is Sirwan, and this was Mars Chronican. Thank you for tuning in. Per aspera. Ad astra. Until next time, done. Thank you, guys. One more minute, I'm almost done. I'll be there in a moment.